This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. To our returning viewers, welcome back. To the newbies, this show has more corny black dude energy than you've ever wanted. And you're welcome. Tonight, more details on the vaccine progress that gives some much needed light at the end of this pandemic's dark tunnel. Plus, if you don't have a ton of student loan debt yourself, you probably know someone who does. We'll look at the option the incoming president has for making good on a campaign pledge to relieve some of that debt. But first, here's what you need to know right now. We don't always have good news to share, especially this year, but today we're witnessing a groundbreaking medical moment. The first COVID vaccinations starting in the United Kingdom. The first vaccination went to 90-year-old Margaret Keenan. The second vaccine recipient, another William Shakespeare, though he prefers to go by Bill. The vaccine should start taking effect within 2 weeks of the first dose.
It could make a difference to our lives from now on, couldn't it? The start of changing our lives and our lifestyle.
British regulators gave emergency authorization to Pfizer and BioNTech's vaccine last week, and it looks like the Food and Drug Administration is leaning the same way. It published documents today saying it also found the vaccine candidate to be safe and effective. The U.S. Army fired or suspended more than a dozen officers and soldiers from Fort Hood after an internal review looked into a string of deaths on the Texas base. In 2020 alone, 28 soldiers assigned to Fort Hood died. 5 were homicides and 8 were suicides.
The findings of the committee identified major flaws with sexual harassment and assault response prevention program from implementation, reporting, and adjudication. This report, without a doubt, will cause the Army to change our culture.
Recent months have seen several investigations into an unhealthy culture at the base, some of those driven by questions around the death of Vanessa Guillen. After her remains were found, a soldier who was also a suspect wanted in connection with her death died by suicide. Today is what's known as Safe Harbor Day in the U.S. electoral system. That's the deadline for states to certify their results in the presidential election, which would legally require Congress to accept Joe Biden's presidential win, even though some Republicans have still been reluctant to do so. The court losses have been piling up for President Trump. Today's deadline puts further limits on the options he and his legal team have left to contest the results. Every state, with the exception of Wisconsin, has met this safe harbor deadline. Now, this messy process is in the hands of the Electoral College, who will cast their votes on December 14th. Those votes will then be sent to the Capitol for counting on January 6th. If the term Pfizer doesn't mean anything to you, then you probably haven't been watching this show even from the beginning, or like any news show. And that's fine, because the developments from Pfizer and BioNTech keep coming, which gives us even more opportunities to break down some promising news for once. Recently released documents from an FDA report break down some of the details about just how effective the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine really is, including how far a single dose of the double-dose formula could go in inoculating people who take it. Newsy's Lindsay Thies breaks it down for us.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it wasn't that bad, was it?
As the United Kingdom begins giving shots, the FDA's analysis of Pfizer's COVID vaccine is out. The major finding, the agency agrees with the drug maker that the vaccine is 95% effective in preventing COVID-19 after 2 doses. It also shows efficacy after just 1 dose, though it's unclear how long that could last.
It does give me some reassurance and hope that even if we struggle to get people to come back in for their second dose, there's still going to be some level of protection.
Jess Atwell is a vaccine expert at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Is it enough information and data that you would feel confident yourself getting a vaccine like this?
Oh, 100%. Yes, absolutely.
Pfizer's vaccine uses a new technology called messenger RNA or mRNA. When injected, the RNA enters healthy cells where it can make coronavirus spike proteins, and that prompts an immune response. You cannot get COVID-19 from the vaccine. The FDA's review found the most common side effects were injection site reactions, fatigue, headaches, muscle pain, chills, joint pain, and fever. Less than 4.6% of vaccine testers had serious reactions. Side effects were more common after the second dose and in testers younger than 55. Now, 30 scientists from the FDA's VRBPAC, that's the Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee, will go through the FDA's 145-page report. Then on Thursday, they'll meet all day, hearing Pfizer, the FDA, and the CDC discuss emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine for people 16 and older. A big discussion point: what happens for vaccine testers who got a placebo shot?
You want them to have access to the vaccine along with everyone else in the country, right? But, in terms of having the carefully collected data, that's a challenge.
The emergency approval discussion will also likely include a plan for safety follow-ups, which will have to happen for 2 years for the vaccine to get full FDA approval. Meanwhile, the pressure is on in the U.S. The latest numbers from Johns Hopkins COVID tracking project show more than 102,000 Americans are in the hospital with COVID-19. More than 20,000 of them are in intensive care. Lindsay Thies, Newsy, Denver.
Somebody hasn't been honest about their height. It's never too late for growth, even if you're 50 to 60 million years old. Here's what's trending. Mount Everest seems to have hit a growth spurt. The world's highest peak is now even higher. Nepal and China, the two countries that share the border where Mount Everest is located, came together and agreed on a measurement. Mount Everest is 29,031.69 feet tall, about 3 feet taller than the most commonly used measurement dating back to the early 1950s. So where exactly did this nearly 3-foot difference come from? It's probably due to shifting tectonic plates. Mountains can sink too, apparently, which could be caused by earthquakes. The wild thing is that people literally sacrifice their bodies to get this measurement. One Nepali surveyor lost the tip of his toe to frostbite, and then his team faced a life-threatening shortage of oxygen on their way down the mountain. The new measurement was needed for a few different reasons. There was an earthquake in Nepal that was thought to have changed the elevation of the mountain, and the joint effort between Nepal and China provided a sense of national pride since previous surveys had been done by outside countries. And one more added bonus: it has led to cooperation between the neighboring countries. Bad news, if you climbed Everest before, it doesn't count. You just have to do it again. It's probably a good time to come out of retirement when the president-elect taps you for a job, yeah? Joe Biden has selected retired General Lloyd Austin to serve as Secretary of Defense. If confirmed, Austin would be the first black person to hold the job. Austin is no stranger to barrier breaking. He was the first black general to command an army division in combat and was the first to oversee an entire theater of operations. President-elect Joe Biden and General Austin also go back a bit. They worked together during the Obama administration when Austin served as the last commanding general of the U.S. forces in Iraq, and Biden was leading Iraq policy. Austin was in charge of the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces in 2011. Austin's confirmation might come with a bit of a challenge. He's been out of the military for 4 years. 7 is the requirement to hold the position, so he would need a waiver from Congress to become Secretary of Defense. That stipulation was established by the National Security Act of 1947 to avoid giving the military too much power. Congress wants someone not too disconnected from civilian life, authorizing military action and recruiting people from the civilian job sector. If confirmed, Austin would be only the second retired general to lead the military. Tired of your work from home setup? Or in my case, my work from work setup? What about switching it out for a space in Hawaii instead? Hawaii is piloting a program called Movers and Shakers. Basically, Hawaii will pay for your airfare on Hawaiian Airlines or Alaskan Airlines if you stay at least 30 consecutive days in Oahu. I bet that got some of y'all's attention, didn't it? Part of the program is access to discounted workspaces like Treehouse, Hawaii Office Centers, and Hub Co-working Hawaii. They are even providing discounts at some local restaurants if you mention you're a part of the program. Hawaii's economy relies heavily on tourism, which we all know has taken a hit because of COVID-19, and they're hoping Movers and Shakers could help. But they do want people to give back while they're in town. A requirement of the program is volunteering at local nonprofits like Girl Scouts of Hawaii and Hawaii Literacy. You only have a week left to get in an application, so if you notice my background changes to a beautiful serene beach, just mind your business. Hundreds of thousands of people living in the US now have a chance to apply for DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. A federal judge recently ordered the Trump administration to restore the program that protects people from deportation who were brought into the country as children. Newsy's Ben Shamiso brings us a story from a person applying for DACA for the very first time.
The Trump administration has fully restored a program that shields around 650,000 young immigrants from deportation, complying with a recent court ruling. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, known as DACA, is now open again to first-time applicants who have been unable to apply since 2017.
I did start to gather my documents and get ready to apply.
Andrea Anaya is one of hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants who could benefit.
If it means that I can have a job and support my family, it's absolutely worth it.
Anaya moved to the U.S. from El Salvador with her mother when she was 5. She turned 15, the minimum age to qualify for DACA, right when President Donald Trump ended the program in 2017, and she missed out on the protection as a result.
When I didn't have DACA, I was just kind of in the air, just waiting for a solution. Am I going to finish college and not have any status and not be able to apply for a job?
For Anaya and other young immigrants, the program's reinstatement is a huge victory. Yet, they are also aware that their future remains uncertain, with more DACA litigation ongoing and with the Trump administration saying it may appeal the latest ruling. Still, Anaya is cautiously optimistic.
I've been afraid my whole entire life about DACA, about my immigration status, that it's to the point where, what am I going to lose?
The Trump administration has long argued that DACA is unconstitutional. The program allows certain undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children to live and work legally, but it doesn't grant them legal status. President-elect Joe Biden has pledged to work with legislators on giving 11 million undocumented immigrants a path to citizenship. But that's likely to be a tough sell for Congress. In the meantime, Biden says he will expand DACA when he takes office, but hasn't offered details yet. Immigrant advocates want him to broaden eligibility.
There are so many other kids that could be eligible but are missing from a year or two.
Ben Shamiso, Newsy.
Working in an empty newsroom during the winter is rough. There's no excess body heat to keep me warm. The good news, I can rock this blanket without folks being all judgy. Student loan debt is a massive weight on millions of Americans. It's the second largest type of debt after mortgages. A new plan from President-elect Joe Biden could wipe out some of that debt and at the same time boost the economy. National reporter Alicia Nieves tells us more about how this debt wipeout could work and, maybe more importantly, what's the likelihood that it could happen.
President-elect Joe Biden campaigned on a promise to forgive some student loan debt, and now millions of Americans are hopeful that will happen shortly after he takes office.
I think it is one of the most accessible ways that President-elect Joe Biden has to stimulate the economy.
Suzanne Kahn is the Director of Education, Jobs, and Worker Power at the Roosevelt Institute and says Biden has two choices for immediate student loan forgiveness. One, push for Congress to include it in the next stimulus package. He's currently doing that and pushing for $10,000 to be forgiven. Two, if Congress doesn't include it in the stimulus package, Biden can issue an executive order by authority given to him in the Higher Education Act. Either option could eliminate student loan debt for roughly 15 million borrowers and reduce the debt of another 30 million Americans.
It is most likely through executive action, or at least the first movement we'll see around it is through executive action. That's really just because the federal government owns 95% of student debt, and the Secretary of Education has the ability to cancel it.
I mean, my sense is it's not inevitable.
Neil McCluskey is the director of the Center for Educational Freedom at the Cato Institute and says student loan forgiveness, especially through executive order, could be the most controversial way to go.
there seems to be straws that certainly he can grab and say, look, this gives me authority to just sort of write off this debt. Other people say it's not clear in the law that he can do that. And so if he were to try to cancel debt through executive action, it would probably end up in court, and it would be a pretty long court battle.
So if you're at home wondering what this means for your student loan debt, ultimately, it is now more likely than ever before that some of your debt could be forgiven, but still nowhere close to guaranteed.
I don't think it's inevitable, but I do think it is exciting that it's on the table, and frankly, important that it's on the table.
I'm Alicia Nieves reporting.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. It's all an effort to help me identify who should not get coal this year. So thank you. This year has introduced a lot of new terms into our lexicon, including twindemic, something hospitals are bracing for as we enter peak flu season in the middle of a pandemic. It's basically the warm and cold air of health crises colliding to form what could be a pretty devastating storm. National reporter Dan Grossman explains how healthcare professionals are preparing.
Over the past month, Eric Genota's garage has become a workshop, fueled by a good cause.
Me personally, I've built around 25 desks.
Making desks for kids who don't have them.
And we found out there was a huge need for them.
Kim Gonsalves helps Eric run Desks for Kids, their way of helping kids in need who are learning from home.
We first heard about it because Eric's brother lives in Maryland, and we found out about Desks by Dads because his brother started building with Desks by Dads.
The Desks by Dads organization has inspired people across the U.S. like Eric and Kim.
It's like a group in Michigan, a group over here in another state where they're building desks. So it's, it started with Desks by Dads, and a lot of them reference Desks by Dads.
I thought, I can build a dozen desks. That seems a reasonable amount of time and effort and money. And I got into it, and we started looking at the need, and it was more than 200 desks are needed just for our little suburb.
So they got to work.
We started just using our own money, just buying up some plywood and some supplies. And now it's just sort of grown a little bit.
With the help of monetary donations, wood donations, and others offering to build desks, they are now working with schools to deliver desks to those who need them most.
They're doing their distance learning all day long on the bed or on the floor.
Back at the beginning of the school year, when it became clear many students who went home in the spring still would not go back to face-to-face learning, economists saw kid desks and other supplies go out of stock. Now, as a second wave of COVID-19 sends students home again, the need is still great.
What we saw with desks is the same thing we saw with many other things, that the pandemic has created new markets for just more of existing products that become more important in a pandemic.
Economist Matt Klaus says desks are a great example of people finding ways to fill supply needs when there's a demand.
When we have a situation where there's a demand for a product and there's not enough of it being produced, then economic theory says that suppliers will convert resources if they can, and they'll start producing what's necessary.
And that's exactly what these volunteer builders are doing, using the resources available to help fill a need.
If you're a family who needs a desk, you could contact your school and say, are you in touch with any builders who are building desks and giving them away? Everyone can make a difference. If you have $22, you can donate to a builder. They can build a desk for a kid.
As the desks are built, Kim and Eric load them up and drive them off to where they are needed most.
And to know that you're making just a little bit of difference, because you wish you could help more. There's more things they might need than just a desk. But this might just help that student be a little more successful this year.
And then it's just blossoming to see the community pull together. It's really given me a lot of hope in a year that's been pretty terrible.
I'm Chloe Nordquist, reporting.
If you've been working from home this year, then you might have struggled with finding just the right spot to get things done. Before this show started, I was working off a kitchen table, a multi-purpose space for eating and for cat antics. Young students have struggled too, with some not even having the basics like a solid workplace. National reporter Chloe Nordquist tells us about volunteers building desks for students who don't have one.
like even the most knowledgeable of researchers.
We're anxiously awaiting to see what happens as this continues to unfold.
Dr. Michelle Barron doesn't have every answer as we enter our worst stretch of this pandemic.
How much is this going to play into things, and is it just going to make everything worse? Will it commingle with COVID and actually make people double sick or doubly ill?
COVID-19 is coinciding with flu season, a potentially dangerous scenario Dr. Barron has given much thought to as the Senior Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control at one of Colorado's largest hospitals.
We've also been really encouraging patients to get their flu shots and make sure that they have that on their list. And we tell them, we understand there's some years that you're sort of debating whether or not it's worth it. And we're like, this is the year you need to get it.
The CDC estimates around 196 million flu shots are available this year, a 13% increase from last year's record-setting dosage of 175 million.
Flu shot immunizations are up 41%. So I think that messaging has been definitely taken hold.
It's an important number, as last year 400,000 people were hospitalized for the flu, a potential burden hospitals have prepared for as bed space is now at a premium.
We've already surpassed the numbers from the first surge. So we're kind of like, okay, what's next?
Maddie Smith works in this COVID ICU in the University of Colorado's hospital. They shot this video for us and say while they haven't reached a tipping point, they are expecting more flu patients to come in as the winter months arrive. To manage, they've made plans to allocate more bed space to the seriously ill, regardless of cause, and treat them with whatever drugs are necessary. The good news, the flu has been treated for years, so doctors have a good plan of attack. And the measures we've taken to reduce the spread of COVID are having a positive effect on the spread of the flu.
We usually are able to use the Southern Hemisphere as a good way to figure out how our flu season is going to look like. They actually had a pretty mild flu season, but COVID hit at the exact same time.
Dr. Barron says 3 to 5% of COVID patients have had co-infection with another virus, showing complications are possible as flu season hits its stride, but not guaranteed.
I don't think it's anything that we can't manage that we haven't already thought about.
I'm Dan Grossman.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back with more in the loop tomorrow, same time, same place. More top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.